Ach, lads, can you believe after 15 weeks we have almost reached the end of the regular season? It's Christmas week. It's time for teams to take the next step in their journey. Christmas Day sees Drew Brees and the New Orleans Saints welcome Kirk Cousins and the Minnesota Vikings. Tom Brady will want to improve further when he goes up against the Detroit Lions, and after a victory against the Philadelphia Eagles, Kyler Murray and the Arizona Cardinals lead the San Francisco 49ers. Finally, it's Tua time. The Dolphins are going to Vegas. Merry Christmas, Nolly Clonachhoit, welcome.
Yeah, for Feliz Navidad to you all, gents. We're definitely, the wife is upset the other week because Strictly Come Dancing's now finished, and I'm about to start crying because the Patriots season's going to be over next week. But maybe one of us, maybe Mr. O'Leary will have a bit of playoff fun. But yeah, only a few weeks left in the NFL season, and it's always tinged with a bit of regret and sadness. But looking forward to the excitement ahead.
Unless you're
Time
giving
will
me a
tell.
Christmas miracle, Mark, that won't be happening.
Well, time will tell if Mr. Ray will have his Christmas treat. I do have a Christmas treat for all of you lads, but I'll tell you about it in a minute. However, until then, let's very quickly look at the game which ruined our reputation on this show. Monday Night Football, the Bengals against the Steelers. Now, every one of us, like I literally think it was the shortest preview ever. And like seriously, like lads, seriously, like we talked about this game. We didn't mention the Bengals once in that Monday night show. The Bengals win 27-17. Now, usually we wouldn't really recap it a Monday night game, but that column starting me, man, that's a huge loss for the Steelers, especially when they've got two huge games coming up in week 16. And I think they play the Browns in week 17. Am I wrong?
Yeah, the Colts and the Browns still to come, but the Steelers are, according to their own head coach, are not a good football team at the moment. Look, having had our collective pants pulled down by the Jets. The Bengals went and did that to us as well. Kudos to them. They were injury ravaged, but they made the right decision. They put Ryan Finlay in at QB. They moved Brandon Allen aside, and they had a QB who, at least is capable of throwing the football. I think even though I think he threw for 89 yards in total, but obviously had the rushing TD. The the Steelers, I suppose, they have got to find some form, because they've gone from the potential number one seed to, they are confirmed, but what will it be for them? Look, hats off, fair play to the Bengals. You have to say they really pulled it out the other night, and Juju Smith-Schuster, I would imagine, has not enjoyed the past couple of days.
Do you recall a couple of years ago in the championship game, Mark Secondwell, the week leading up to the championship game, after the Steelers won in Kansas City, they were having a big celebration in the dressing room, and Antonio Brown purposely put celebrations out on social media, and he was giving it the big one to the Patriots. The Patriots are obviously watching it going, this is going to be fantastic for us. Not that we need any more motivation to get into a Super Bowl. And the last couple of weeks, Juju Schuster has purposely danced on halfway lines in opposing teams' stadiums, which for the Bengals, who have nothing to play for, is a great fit up for Taylor to go in there and go in and say, these guys don't think we're here tonight, and they don't think we're serious for this game. And you only had to say about that hit that Schuster took in the game where they were all making sure he knew, when you're here in Cincinnati tonight, Tomlin should be correcting those issues, making sure players are playing by the rules and not causing any other motivation for the team they're playing, because they're on it. They're struggling now. They're playing the Colts this week, the Browns the week after that. They could actually now have a Week 17 game, which we never would have believed 3 or 4 weeks ago, which now could be what Michael likes to see as a game flex into Sunday Night Football, because it could be a divisional game.
Yeah, definitely. I think it'll be flexed. Sorry, Mark. I was going to say, Mark, that'll definitely be flexed. Yeah, 100%.
100%. I mean, it's funny. We, looking back, we did say, hey, any given Sunday or Monday, anything can happen. And we did actually call out after what the Jets did, maybe miracles can happen again. I mean, looking back, I'm disappointed we didn't call out that the Bengals defense, especially since Burrow has gone down, has tightened up even further and could give the Steelers offense, which has been sporadic lately, some trouble. And that's exactly how it played out. Big Ben couldn't find his receivers. Even when he could find them, they were dropping balls. And the Bengals offense was not complicated, to be fair, but Gio Bernard really was the workhorse powering that game. Finley didn't make any stupid mistakes, and they put together a great win. I mean, watching it, because like an idiot, I did stay up and watch the vast amount of the game again. I was reminded of the famous Battle of Thermopylae, because, of course, it felt like the Bengals, written off by many, lost, abandoned by their own troops, were left with the mere 300 trying to ward off Xerxes and his Persian army. And whilst that battle ultimately ended in glorious defeat and death, like the Bengals season is going to, because it's going to be 3-13 probably for them to finish the season. What a way to go down. They went down in glory. They didn't damage their draft position, and they beat the dreaded and hated Steelers, destroying a little bit of Big Ben's record against Ohio teams. It's almost like they went like, this is Ohio, and they fought to the end.
Well, there's everybody's Christmas present if they ever needed that reference. That was lovely.
Did you not think that yourself, Michael, when you watched the game? No.
I watched Friday Night Lights the whole night.
Okay.
And sat looking at it on my iPad very briefly. I watched the fourth quarter. I was shocked towards the end because the Steelers, even though it sat there was 27-17, there was a chance towards the end where the Steelers could have came back into the game to even tie the game, and they just looked awful. So I think the main point, Brian, in what I'll say is this: who's number 2 in the AFC now?
The Buffalo Bills.
Yeah.
But we did suggest that at the weekend. We didn't suggest that we're coming in terms of that game, but we did make the point that the Bills are going in the right direction and the Steelers are stuttering. And it's just as well we did have a preview show for this game, because if it was a part of our Sunday wrap-up, as part of the NFL show on a Sunday, you would have been saying, there's no need to talk about this game. And as me and Colin always say, you should always talk about every game.
Well, I have definitely, Colin, had my trousers pulled down in regards to the Rams and the Jets. So I think we'll talk about every game from now on. You know what? We'll even talk about the bus journey to the stadium from now on, because clearly I have missed out on these multiple factors. Yeah.
We have some great games to talk about now, in fairness.
We do. Let's jump on the first game. Now, there's nothing better, boys, and this is a true story, than my wife's face when I told her I'd be watching the NFL on Christmas night at 9 o'clock. You should have seen her face. Not happy at all. But still, we'll be watching it, so it's grand. Decent game, especially for Christmas night, because if it was a dead rubber, it would almost be what I got there. But it's a very good game, in my opinion, for Christmas night. 6-8 Vikings, 10-4 Saints. The game is in the Superdome. Colin, I'll start with you. What's your thoughts on this game, and who do you think will come out on top? Obviously, the Saints got beaten by the Chiefs last week it was quite a fast-paced game, but I guess it wasn't that close in the end up.
No, Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs did Patrick Mahomes and Chiefs things. And the Saints coming into this game, coming off the loss to the Eagles, there's a lot of history with the Vikings as well, and I'm sure Sean Payton will have the Saints well drilled in relation to that. The Vikings are one of the teams that I'm sad that the season is coming to an end, because I think they are fascinating to watch. They're missing some pieces. Their secondary it has not been good enough all season long. But Dalvin Cook has been absolutely outstanding, and Justin Jefferson is, Mark rightly pointed out, he won't get Offensive Rookie of the Year. I still think he should get it. I really enjoyed him the other night, like telling Kirk Cousins, voicing the frustration that I imagine most of the Viking fan base has, where Kirk Cousins just throw the goddamn football. He has really been like a duck to water, and I see he was sliding into CD Lamb's girlfriend's DMs apparently during the week as well. So doing wide receiver things on and off the field. Unfortunately for the Vikings, it's not going to be enough because they cannot keep Kirk Cousins upright. The Saints got to Mahomes 4 times last weekend, and Cousins has been sacked 13 times in the last 3 games. That is going to be an issue for them. The Saints need to get back to winning ways, and I imagine they will have a happier Christmas at home in the Superdome, and they will get the win in this one.
You know what's slightly concerning for me at the moment is the Saints. And you might be surprised by this because Kamara is such a dynamic player, but their own game is a problem. They don't have a proper number one running back, the likes of what Dalvin Cook brings and Henry brings to the Titans. Kamara hasn't rushed for over 75 yards, for over 100 yards in 7 games now. He didn't reach even 75 last week. It's a consistent problem, and you could see it last week very early on in the game. Breeze, who was only coming back, was left in a position similar to what Big Ben has been having to do recently, which is continuously throw, and they had to kind of split up then the plays in terms of bringing Taysom Hill back into the game for a while to allow Breeze a couple of plays where he could rest up on the sideline, because there's just no resting for him because the running game is just not working. But we've touched on it so many times this year. It isn't about the Saints offense this year. You might have thought at the start of the season. It's about their defense. Their defense is ranked number 3 in the league for a reason. You know, they've had a few difficult games recently. Look, any defense coming up against the Chiefs, we touched on it last week. Mahomes is now 8-0 against top 5 defense in his career. He knows how to take advantage of defense no matter whether they're good or bad. So you could take that game away. The Saints defense is really good, especially in the dome. And as Colin alluded to, how Cousins is going to be able to stay upright and be productive, it's hard to see how he will do that.
Yeah, I mean, the Minnesota Vikings, if I can quote Churchill's comments on Russia, are very much an enigma wrapped in a mystery, wrapped in a riddle, surrounded by a mystery. At the start of the season, I thought they were odds on to be really competitive in the NFC North with the Packers for the division title. Disappointed then, seemed to get things back on track. And just when we thought, the playoff push is coming, they're going to go for one of those wild cards, they dropped the game to the Cowboys. They obviously dropped the game last week to the Bears. They've been a severe disappointment. And yes, I'm wearing blue or bluish purple, but I'm not wearing a Minnesota Vikings top. But if I am a Minnesota Vikings fan, I am looking at my GM and wondering, why the hell did you give Kirk Cousins a 2-year, $66 million contract extension this March? He had not blown you away on the 3-year fully guaranteed contract, and now you've just caused a whole lot more pain. We talked about Philadelphia and their quarterback troubles and the amount of dead cap they'd have to eat. Vikings are in that similar circumstance now going forward. And yes, focusing on the Vikings, Cook and Jefferson have been stars, but too many of the, if you like, the mid-tier, Thielen's had a good season, not maybe to the heights of last, but, a very solid season. But too many of their mid-tier players haven't stepped up. Their defense, which is impressive on paper and has stood up in certain games, has been inconsistent at best. And all in all, it's been a lost year for the Vikings. The Saints, on the other hand, we've talked about it before. This feels so much like Breeze's last stand. He probably looked the best against the Chiefs than he has done for a year. But I fully agree with Brian's point. The run game ever since they didn't have that 1-2 punch of Ingram and Kamara has dropped off a cliff completely. And yes, Breeze can throw around, and any team that has Michael Thomas, Drew Brees, and Alvin Kamara can put up points and threaten teams. But they're going to need more than that in the playoffs if it is to be truly the last ride for him, a la John Elway or The Undertaker.
Absolutely. Look, I look at this and I agree with you boys just saying about Drew Brees and about Alvin Kamara especially. That run game is sketchy enough for the Saints in a minute based upon the last few weeks' performance. But the reality is, when you got guys like Dalvin Cook, Adam Thielen, Justin Jefferson on the offense for the Vikings, if they turn up on Christmas night, boys, or Christmas afternoon in New Orleans, they're going to give this New Orleans team at least a bit of a scare as far as I'm concerned. It will come down to how good that New Orleans defense can be. I personally think that the Vikings are going to win this game. I really do. I think this is a trap game for the Saints. I really thought, to be fair, I really sat down and thought about this. I haven't just come in going, no. Genuinely, the Saints last week, I think were dealt a bit of a blow. I really do. And for me, I think Breeze is not at the level he's not at 100%. I think Breeze is done, boys. I really do. And I think I just can't see the same scenario, albeit like as a Broncos fan, whenever Peyton Manning was coming back in again towards the playoffs, he was never at 100%. But for me, Breeze hasn't got that offense around him. Kamara, as Brian said, hasn't played well in the last few games. I think this is a trap game. I think the Saints will fall to 10-5. And the Vikings will go towards that 8-8 record that they're trying to seek in the NFC. Probably won't be enough, but yeah, I think the Vikings are going to win, boys. Dalvin Cook 2 touchdowns. Is that okay?
So, well, I'm going to go with the Saints. I think Colin was alluded to the defense of the Vikings this year has been poor. The secondary in particular has been really bad. I think at the halfway stage of the season, they were the worst team in terms of giving up touchdowns in the secondary. And I think Breeze, having come back last week, will have another week to get himself ready. And I think he'll exploit that poor secondary and he'll put up good points. And yeah, the Vikings offense has been up and down all season, but they have scored over 26 points in 5+ games. So I could see it being a high scoring one, but I still believe the Saints will come out on the right side of it.
Excellent. Colin, picking the Saints, Colin, yeah?
No, as I was saying, I don't think that the Vikings are going to be able to keep Cousins upright. That'll be the undoing. I expect Jefferson to have another big game. I think Dalvin Cook will likely have another big game, but their secondary just, as much as Breeze has had his struggles, he was still throwing it around. He still had a couple of really nice throws against the Chiefs, and I just think they will have too much. I think when it comes to the crunch, that's why I would say the Packers are my favorites to get to the Super Bowl on that side of the house. But I expect the Saints to have too much for the Vikings.
Gotta remember, boys, the most of the Saints players, I think 31 of them played in that infamous miracle in Minnesota. So there's plenty of them that have reason to want to give pain back to the Minnesota Vikings. Nothing will equal the pain, of course, but they'll get a small modicum of revenge. Saints to win for me by at least a touchdown.
Nice.
And also call out, don't ever forget that. Sorry, Michael, I know it's a long time now. 2009, 2010 season, but that championship game where the Saints played the Vikings and Brett Favre was literally, he had the head taken off him at times by that Saints defense. I mean, there's always been a bit of needle between them, and I don't think it's gone away just yet.
I think taking away from the result, hopefully, please God, we obviously have a good game tomorrow, and it's Christmas. We want to put the feet up and we want to enjoy the NFL. And it is a standout game from these Christmas games, as far as I'm concerned. Maybe we don't agree with that, but we'll talk about that now in a second. We've a few games on St. Stephen's Day and Boxing Day, lads. We've got, first of all, we've got the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who are 9-5, just one game off the Saints as it stands, as the time of this recording. going up against the 5-9 Detroit Lions. That game is in Detroit. Colin, we're going to start with you. Just for these games on St. Stephen's Day, what do you think of the matchup column, and who do you think will win and why?
I said at the weekend show that the Bucks beat up on bad teams, and I think that's what they will do here. The issue the Bucks had against the Falcons, they're bullies, and they underestimated the Falcons, I think, but they came out at the end. Antonio Brown had his first big enough game, and I think he offers them another threat. Mike Evans is obviously the star of the show. I think he's the guy who's really going to come up trumps, and I think he will in this game. The Lions, they really struggled against Tannehill. I mean, Brian was talking about vintage Brett Favre, and they made Tannehill look like vintage Brett Favre at the weekend. And I think they're going to make Brady look like vintage Brady in this game. Their season they've gotten rid of Patricia and the GM. They have Hawkinson and they have Swift. The season, I suppose, comes down to them deciding now what they're going to do with Matt Stafford in terms of 2021. But I think the Bucks win this one. For me, they just have too many weapons.
Yeah, like the situation in Detroit, they really want that season over as quickly as possible. So not only at the moment they do not have a GM, a head coach, now they don't even have an interim head coach for this game because Sean Bevel, Darnell Bevel, is he's gone on the COVID list because he's been in close contact with someone who tested positive. So Sean Ryan, the quarterback's coach, is going to take the game from him. So, a less than an inspiring situation there. Yeah, the Bucks, they haven't been in the playoffs for 15 years since the 2007-2008 season. They're putting up an average 28.5 points. The Lions, every game the Lions have lost this season, they've given away 30 points. How do you see it? The Lions are overcoming that defensively. They just haven't been good. You saw that last week. Their defense was exploited by the Titans team, who are explosive, and the Bucks are explosive as well. So for me, it's going to be an easier game for the Bucks than they had last week, and I don't think they'll be complacent like they were. I would have thought they were slightly complacent in the first half of last week, came back well. But obviously, it'll be interesting to see what the result of that Saints game is, because having said for weeks that this division was over, having lost the last two games for the Saints, the Bucks are now only one game behind, and there is a scenario where potentially they could still win the division, albeit very slight. But it'll be interesting to see how everything plays out from here.
Yeah, I mean, the Saints would have to lose out and the Bucks would have to win out, because the Saints have the tiebreaker if they finish level. So you're right, there is a chance. I'd like to think that probably not going to happen. I think the Saints have got that division probably. Look, guys, William Butler Yeats in Sailing to Byzantium had some great lines. He said, "That is no country for old men," and had an expression that an aged man is but a paltry thing, a tattered one upon a stick. He clearly had never met Thomas Edward Patrick Brady, because he is the oldest active quarterback in the NFL. I think now with Vinatieri's retirement, he's actually the oldest player, full stop, in the NFL, and he's still delivering. Yes, is he delivering Air Brady like the 2007 season? No. Is he delivering the type of performances maybe 10 other quarterbacks would deliver with the receiving threats he has? Probably no. I'd say this is the first time Brady's fallen outside the top 10 in terms of quarterback talent. But he's still got enough arm strength. He's still got enough savvy. He is not washed up, as Michael, I think, wanted him to be and what was alluding to him to be before. And they still have the talent to go on a run. The one thing they have to do, though, is they have to start putting it together consistently. Colin says they've beaten up bad teams. They beat up the Panthers. I think they put 46 past them. And last week they were absolutely complacent against the Falcons. They need to put some consistent performances together with the Lions, the Falcons again next week, before they go into the playoffs and hopefully maybe make a bit of a splash. I think they've more than enough for the Lions. The Lions are a team in flux. The Lions off-season is more important to them than anything else. And I absolutely agree. Decisions about Matt Stafford, decisions about the entire roster and the construct going forward are going to be key. If I'm the Ford family, I look at And we alluded to this on the show on Sunday about the consistency of a good GM and coach together. You look at what Lynch and Shanahan are accomplishing in San Francisco, for example, is a good example of that. So get the right people in, give them 7-year contracts, and in fairness, let them blow it up and start it all over again. The Lions have bounced back since Patricia's loss. They came back against the Bears. They've performed very well. I do not think this will be a walkover game, but one team is bound for the playoffs and has to start playing more consistently like a playoff game. So Tampa Bay Bucks to win, but I expect greater things. I expect great things from the GOAT. What can I say?
It's interesting that Mark touches on what they're going to do with Matt Stafford, because usually we start reading these crazy speculative stories coming out in the woodworks when the season ends. But this week, from someone who 9 times out of 10 seems to have his finger on the pulse, Peter King, suggesting that the Patriots, I think it's because Mark doesn't really want them, but that's not to say it won't happen. But Matt Stafford to the Patriots?
In a word, no.
Well, the beautiful thing about the show is that's now on camera, along with me saying the Giants had no chance last day overnight.
And that the Packers won't go to the Super Bowl, yeah.
Yeah, look, 2 out of 3 so far. Hopefully, I think, boys, like I agree with what you're saying. I think it's a full house here, to be honest. At the end of the day, the Patriots, wow, the Bucks have been ineffective or inconsistent this season so far, but they're still sitting at 9-5. I would take that. I think anybody would take that sitting in week 15, week 16 of the season. Guys, like, I know I'm jumping on the Broncos bandwagon again, but guys like Shaq Barrett have had good games in the past against the Lions. I think he's going for his 3rd sack this time. This won't be a contest. I'm not saying don't watch it, but this will not be a contest. This will be a training exercise for Tom Brady and his team to get better and better. I can't see the Saints losing against Carolina in week 17, so he's all right. Obviously, there's the tiebreaker in that division, but it will be a training exercise for the Bucks, who will probably use week 17 as a bye week, to be brutally honest. I think you could see a nice day from Antonio Brown.
Well, the only thing I'd say about week 17 in terms of suggesting a bye week is there'll still be a few permutations, and they might look at potential opponents in the playoffs in terms of what seeding they land on. Would you rather play away to Seattle, or would you rather go somewhere else? I wouldn't be ruling that just yet. For example, if they hit 5, they play the NFC East, they could be going to Washington. You'd probably rather go to Washington than go to Seattle. So
that's a good point.
Yeah. Well, just one thing. I mean, Tom Brady, bear in mind, has still never lost against the Atlanta Falcons with his comeback. He's 7-0. I don't think he'd mind playing the Seattle Seahawks again for some reason either, Brian, to be honest.
I will when he's going out to Seattle, trust me.
If you're trying to imply, Mark, the Super Bowl thing, when the Seahawks messed it up and the player that was involved there doesn't play for him anymore and he enjoys Skittles and stuff, I don't think that's getting. I'm just taking on. Again,
I don't know. I think proper planning and preparation prevents piss poor performance is the expression that comes to mind there when Belichick coached them against that exact play, and I know Brady came back against a 10-point deficit against the Legion of Boom, the best defense passing defense there was in the league. We can talk about the Super Bowl before, if you like, Michael, when Denver Broncos lost 43-8. Just if you want, we can talk about that one instead.
No, do you know what? Because I was happy enough because 2 years later we won it, so it didn't really matter at that point. But sure, it's all good, and we will move on swiftly. That Bucks game is at 6 o'clock our time, 9:30 on St. Stephen's night on Boxing Night. Is, I mean, the battle of the desert. The 49ers, who are 5-9, going up against Kyler Murray, starting to get hot. Colin again, 8-6. So again, Kyler Murray's team a game off the Bucks, 2 games off the Saints in the NFC playoff picture. Colin, what's your opinion on this matchup and who is going to win this game and why?
I think for the Cards, it's a great game, right? Because it's a proper test for them to kind of figure out where they are. They're on a bit of a run. Murray is getting hot. He did his first 400-yard game last week. And the 49ers, obviously this was the game that began this season, and the Cards won. So for them, it's an opportunity to measure themselves. For the 49ers, it's been a lost season, just injury after injury after injury, not being able to get a QB, and I think they've now shut down Deebo Samuel and Raheem Mostert, so they lose yet more weapons. That said, defensively, they're usually pretty good. Obviously, last week Pollard put up some big numbers, but ordinarily they're good. And if you want to test yourself, you definitely want to try and test yourself maybe against a Kyle Shanahan team. Larry Fitz had his first TD catch, which I'm sure, do it for Larry. And Mark was probably cheering that on. And Hopkins was great again. So for me, the Cards will win this. But no harm to go up against a guy who is innovative, who will try new things in Shanahan. And I suppose, Vance Joseph, I think they still are struggling to find how to fit Isaiah Simmons into that. And if they can get that to work, that would be, that would really unlock their defense and what they could do. But Vance Joseph just hasn't figured that out. I still think, despite all that, the Cards will win this one.
Yeah, a fortnight ago, Michael, you suggested that the Eagles were on their way back and potentially going to win the division. And I said, no, the bubble will burst very quickly, because having watched Kyler Murray against the Giants that week, you could see he was back to himself. And Collins alluded to it, a 400-yard game last week. He ran for a touchdown again. He hadn't ran for a touchdown in 4 to 5 weeks. He certainly looked himself. He had 3 or 4 good drives last week. They got into the red zone. There was a fumble by Hopkins. The game, to me, last week was closer than it should have been. And I felt the Cardinals were back to themselves. And yeah, Collins alluded to the 49ers are banged up, and once the defense has kept them in games, they still gave up a lot of points last week to an explosive Cowboys offense at times, but Andy Dalton being the QB. So if Andy Dalton can have a really good game against that defense, what can Kyler Murray do? And Mullins is gone. CJ Beathard is going to start a quarterback who not many people know, but people who know who his grandfather is, Bobby Beathard. And you know why he's so famous in the NFL? Because he's the general manager that drafted Ryan Leaf. There you go. Keep it in the family. For me, the Cardinals will win comfortably.
I was just about to mention the Ryan Leaf pick. He clearly has a penchant for associating himself with mediocre quarterbacks. Well, that's a bit mean. CJ Beathard is probably the best QB3 in the entire league, but that kind of feels like damning him with faint praise in some respects. He is actually a very functioning quarterback in that regard, and certainly I'd rather him coming in than Ryan Finley, but even Ryan Finley can win games, it seems. Can't agree more. It's a lost season for the 49ers. It's very sad given how obviously they were coming back to the season with a lot of optimism, wanting to right the wrongs of their Super Bowl loss last year. Raheem Mostert, who came into the season off the back of that amazing performance in the NFC Championship game, yes, he's injured now, but he hasn't actually broken 100 yards rushing in any game this season. So for someone that had a lot to say about his performance and how he should be paid and how he should be respected, he's very much fallen off the radar there in the capability of what's expected. 49ers lost 6 of the last 7 games. They are playing hard. They are playing for their coach still, but that is not a welcome pattern. And Kyler Murray is healthy. Larry Fitz, you alluded to it, great touchdown catch. And D-Hop is just the best wide receiver in the league at the moment. And if anyone ever wants to defend that trade by Houston, obviously Bill O'Brien's already paid for it with his job, but there is not a fan. You can be the most blind-eyed Texan fan in the world, and there is zero way you can defend that trade in relation to it. Getting peanuts on the best wide receiver in the game is bizarre. Cards all the way for me. Kyler getting healthy. Do it for Larry. Get that final wildcard slot. Sorry, Bears fans. I don't see the Cards slipping up in this game. And yeah, let's, maybe they make magic happen like Kurt Warner and Larry did back in those days, when they ultimately a home game in the NFC Championship game. So maybe once more into the breach, dear friends.
It went well for them in 2015, didn't it?
Mhm.
Went really well for them. Got beat by what, 30 or 40 points. I actually think this is going to be another trap game for the Cardinals. Kyler Murray was great last week, really done well. But the reality is, boys, the 49ers have signed Josh Rosen as a backup quarterback. And I agree with what you guys are saying. CJ Beathard is a very good third string quarterback. But why can't the 49ers win this game? Their defense could carry them through this game. When they played in September, albeit it was September, there was only 3 or 6 points in the game. I just think when you've got a team with an inexperienced quarterback, I mean, Kyler Murray is only in his second season. The pressure is now on him. I just have a feeling that they're going to struggle in this game. I really do. I think it'll come down to the defense. And for me, I think the 49ers are going to win by field goal.
Michael, you were just saying, you rightly said that Murray's in his second season. It was interesting because Mark said previously about the Lions and they should bring somebody in and look to give them 7-year contracts. I think those days of needing, an eternity to rebuild, the game has changed. I mean, when you look at what, say, Cliffsbury has done with the Cards, when you look what Flores has done, I'm not saying it all has to be rebuilt instantaneously, but you have to show, I think, signs of life. We talked the other night about the way in which, the comparison, say, between Baker Mayfield and John Elway, and when you looked at the stats, the way in which the game has changed, the way in which analysis has changed, the sheer amount of data that you now have available, you just cannot say like the Raiders have done, and when we come into this, giving somebody a 10-year contract to try and rebuild, that seems very, very, very silly. So to me, I think what the Cards have done has been really, really impressive in a short space of time.
Yeah, and to the point about rebuilding, like the team that are in this game, the 49ers, they, went 4-12 one season, and the next season they were in the Super Bowl. But you could see potentially what was coming down the line because of the rebuilding with Shanahan and Lynch had done in those 2 years. And I think most people would say this is a throwaway season for the 49ers because the number of injuries they've had. And then when they did get 2 of their key players, Jimmy G and Kittle back, they were gone quickly enough after getting the serious injuries in Seattle. So it's a lost season for them. I would still expect them to rebound next year. But to the point they're rebuilding, it can take 2 years these days. Even the Rams did it very quickly when McVay went in there.
Mark, 33 points scored by the Cardinals last week. Sorry to jump in.
Yeah, they're an efficient offense. I mean, that's what we expected when Kingsbury came out of Texas Tech, that they would perform. And it's funny, he's actually running quite a conventional offense, albeit with certain design runs for Murray or, Murray work your magic scenarios. It's not been all strange RPOs and college spread options. He's just letting people do sensible things. But the thing that strikes me, just want to fill up the wine glass, strikes me there is Colin mentioning about the stats in the modern game. It is a remarkable statistic, in fact, and whenever we're comparing eras to eras, that we must remember this season, Joe Flacco passed in yards thrown for Joe Montana. Those two Joes should never be mentioned in the same sentence, especially not Joe Flacco above Joe Montana. But that's the reality of the modern game and the proliferation of passing that we've experienced now.
Lovely. I agree, and that was obviously not a wine glass at all there, Mark and all. Yeah, sorry, I actually meant to say, I actually got the team wrong, Mark, and sorry for jumping in, but I was going to say as well, 49ers also scored 33 points last week, albeit against the Cowboys when they got beat 41-33. Just keep an eye on the 49ers in this game. The final game, actually that game really quickly, that game is in America, is only on Amazon and Twitch. I'll just repeat that. That game in America is only on Amazon and Twitch. So
so we're fortunate that we don't have to hassle with that.
Well, it's just weird. It's Christmas and people are obviously off work. I mean, it must be like it's an extra game sort of thing. Let's see what happens. But there is a game on, the last game of the night, which is the 9-5 Miami Neil Reynolds Dolphins going up against the 7-7 Las Vegas Raiders. Colin, now They haven't played each other for quite a while. They haven't played each other since 2018. What's your thoughts on this game, and who do you think will win?
There are a couple of interesting things in this game. The Miami secondary has been outstanding for most of the season, but their pass rush has kind of come out to play over the last few weeks, and they got to Cam 3 times last week. So I suppose at this point, we're not entirely sure who is going to start a QB for the Raiders. I've heard different reports that it definitely will be Mariota. Also, that Derek Carr is trending in the right direction. But I think whoever it is, you can expect Miami to make life difficult for them. One of the pieces I'm really interested in this game is what the Dolphins try and do with Waller, right? He had another big game last week. Mariota obviously had the really nice touchdown pass to him. But do they try and put Xavier Howard on him? I mean, what do they do to try to slow him down? I think that could be one of the interesting things, because Xavier Howard has just been outstandingly good. The Raiders struggled obviously against Herbert. Tua is not the QB that Herbert is. I don't believe. He has had the defense and the special teams to thank for a lot of the victories, whereas Herbert has really been putting that team on his back. I think the Dolphins will win it, and I'm sure the Raiders will be in it, because if they're to have any opportunity of getting to the playoffs, and they've really I think probably already damaged their chances too much. But I just don't see them being able to overcome and score enough points against this Dolphins defense.
Yeah, I said last week that I thought that game against the Chargers was the one they really needed to have in order to put themselves in a position to beat Miami this week and then potentially overtake them in the wild cards. But haven't seen the run now the Ravens are on, and the Browns and the Steelers are already locked in, worst case, the wild card. It's very remote now to see how the Raiders are going to get in. And you look at their defense, 9 games that they've given over 30 points this year. You can't seem to defend against wide receivers, against tight ends. Their run games are going up against them. And then last week against the Patriots, the run game for the Dolphins was very efficient. Breida, who they took on from 49ers, looks like an effective running back that's starting to make way for the Dolphins. So for me, the Dolphins really need this game, and I think the pressure will be building on Gruden, because I see the Dolphins winning. And then the best they're going to get is a 500 season, an 8-8 record at best. And I know you used to play them next week, so you'll be keen to beat them as well. So I think the Raiders are done. I think the Dolphins will win and cement that wild card place.
Guys, it's Christmas week and Marley is doing the rounds. There is the ghosts of Christmas past circling, and this season has actually dispelled some of those ghosts from some teams. The Buffalo Bills are finally dispelling the specter, if you like, after 25 years of not measuring up to the great teams of Mild Levy and Jim Kelly and the like. The Miami Dolphins have shown life for the first time since Don Shula retired, and indeed since Dan Marino retired. They actually think they have a quarterback. In fact, they've probably got 2 at the moment. They're quite well functioning in a very well coached team. And then the Las Vegas Raiders still cannot break, even though the mantra of just win baby from Al Davis has been passed down to Mark, they cannot break what they once had with the Magic, with John Madden, with the craziness of the Raiders team as it was in the past. They were 7-5 in prime position for a wildcard spot, and they've just gone on to lose their last 2 games. And it's, in some ways, it's depressing to see. Like, Derek Carr has progressed and regressed as a quarterback, it seems, in the same game. I think, Colin, you alluded to it last week, Marcus Mariota came into that game, and he didn't look like the Marcus Mariota we saw in Tennessee. He looked like a really solid quarterback, and he looked like an upgrade on Derek Carr in limited action. I mean, he came out 22-yard strike, ran for 11 yards, drove a lovely drive to score a touchdown basically in his first action back. And I'm not saying let's replace Carr with Mariota automatically, but it's kind of like where the Raiders have resided in the last while. So much promise, so much potential, so much opportunity. They've got Josh Jacobs. They've got Darren Waller, who's probably been more wide receiver than tight end, probably the best outside of Travis Kelce, must be said, best receiving tight end in the game. And despite trading Khalil Mack, they have had at times a functioning defense, albeit with no pass rush. Yeah, Mike Mayock and John Gruden, maybe trading Khalil Mack wasn't such a good move after all. And can the Raiders win this game? Of course they can. Tua's still a rookie quarterback. He's still due a bad game. The Raiders are a very good side. They have won 7 games in the National Football League this season. But it just feels like their star is on the wane and they've another year consigned to the history books, consigned to the vestiges of the ghosts rolling through their empty stadium. Whereas in Miami, the sun is out, the guns are out, and the fun is out. And so I think Miami are going to plow on ahead.
I am really torn here. I think if Miami were playing anybody else, I'd be like, yeah, Miami will win. No bother at all. But, looking at the last few weeks, Miami only put up 13 points against the Broncos, which is like, Jesus. Do you know what I mean? Like, they only put up 20 against the Jets. They only put up 19 against the Bengals. And they ran the Chiefs quite close. They only put up 22 against one of Bill Belichick's worst ever teams. I'm really torn. As of this recording, we don't know who. And please correct me if I'm wrong. As of this recording, we don't know who's going to start a quarterback for the Raiders. But it would lead for me to think it will be Marcus Mariota. He's got something to prove, big time. And that team with Josh Jacobs and with Darren Waller has a chance against a team that has not scored many points on the offense over the last few weeks. And the Miami Dolphins are a good team. They are a good team. And I think the Raiders will win this game, but I also think the Raiders will go 9-7. There's no chance, Colin. Let's just say this now. We're 50-odd minutes into this show. There is no chance the Denver Broncos are beating that Raiders team next week. I have them going 9-7 to finish the season, but they won't get to the playoffs. They won't. The Bills play the Dolphins next week.
You still got them coming 8th then, outside the playoff spots.
Yeah, I think the Bills will rest week after next.
Just to answer your question, Michael. Sorry, Mariota will be starting the game.
I think they'll win.
By the way, Michael, I think we've got a new nickname for you then. Because you said about 3 times that you were torn, so I think you're Natalie Imbruglia from now on.
I'm a lot of faith.
Yeah,
this is how I feel. Alone.
Is that about the Broncos?
Yeah, just a little bit.
With the Broncos, he's just saying, "I'm cold and I'm ashamed," lying naked on the floor.
And that's just true luck. Yeah, I mean, I know. I really went against the bat. I do think the Vikings will win. I think the Bucs will win. I think the 49ers will win. I think the Raiders will win. So if you're a betting man, don't come near me this week. But I just have a reason. I think, it's a weird time of the year. It's a time when the results matter the most. And that's just what I think. And look, it's grand. Any final points, boys, before we round up?
All I'd say is there is obviously something quirky about the games. You're right, Michael. And once we all make our picks based on what we've seen this season, the law of averages is 1 game out of the 4 is likely to go a certain way that me, Mark, and Colin don't expect you for another reason is telling me at 9 o'clock you're all over the Dolphins and an hour later the Raiders are going to win. So,
well, I would say apart from that Christmas game, Colin, for a start, like that Raiders Dolphins game really does stand out as the pick of the bunch because who wants to the Bucs against the Lions? What is this, 2001?
Well, I think what that Dolphins Raiders game is, they both are still, as much as the Raiders are still in with a chance, right? And so they have to if they're to have any hope whatsoever, they have to win. So you're going to have 2 teams really going for it in that instance, which makes it interesting. Plus the fact that, as you said, like on offense, the Dolphins, that's where they have really struggled, particularly in the passing game. So that is what really gives the Raiders a chance. So I do think it's an interesting game. I just think that the way in which the Raiders, like, they should be totally on the slide. I mean, had they not come up with that absolute last second miracle, the Jets would be on 2 wins. So I think that the Raiders, just in the back end of the season, have really struggled. It's really difficult to pick it up again. That's why, to me, the Dolphins are favorite, but I do think it's an interesting game.
Yeah, it is the marquee game of the 4. You could say the Vikings and Saints will be an entertaining game, but in terms of where the teams are, and the Raiders having a slight chance, because I don't believe the Vikings are anyway in the picture now. That is the standout game of the 4.
Any final words, Mark, my friend? Any final words?
Yeah, I just think when we should talk about the duel in the desert more, the Arizona Derby, the first time we're going to have 2 Arizona teams facing off against each other.